Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our presentation in coordination with the ACE Summit. My name is Gary Schindel, and I want to welcome you to our presentation of what happens the day after open house, or more importantly, the value of implementing an equipment management strategy during master planning. This is an AIA approved program, and it'll be done through the ACE registration that you've already started. So I will just cruise through these slides here. So a little bit about my background. I'm a current member and past board chair of the fellow of the Health Facility Institute. I've served on a few of the Facility Guidelines Institute subcommittees, developing the new standards for emergency conditions and surge. I've got over 45 years as a certified EMT firefighter and a former paramedic, and I'm still active in the Central Florida Disaster Medical Coalition medical response team, and I've been involved in many hundreds of healthcare facility projects around the world for the last 40 years. So the objectives today are pretty straightforward. We're going to identify and understand the issues of repetitive, unnecessarily avoidable financial losses to healthcare facilities. We're going to understand how to develop, design, and provide a life cycle cost reduction solutions to your clients and to our users who are listening, and how to identify key areas that impact hospital reimbursement rates, HCAP scores, and how to avoid penalties, provide users with the means to grow and change and adapt and future-proof your environments. We hear that term a lot. We're going to talk about actually some tangible things that we can use to make that happen, and to create a solution for surge population emergency management, hot on everybody's list in a post-COVID-19 environment. So the concept of an equipment management tool was brought out there a long time ago in the 1960s by a company called Fairfield Medical Products. It really brought in the difference between dealing with a patient care environment and managing a patient care environment. Wherever you deal with something, you're fundamentally compromised because you're reacting to the environment. When you're managing something, you are proactive and you are managing the environment. So that's what Fairfield started back in the 1960s, and we have picked that up and are moving forward with that same basic concept. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So what are peers saying? The market right now is rife with articles in Healthcare Design Magazine and just about anywhere you turn about adaptability and flexibility and all the other abilities that we need to identify and try to tie into our healthcare designs. But there's not a lot out there on how we can tangibly do that. What is a true vehicle we can implement in our designs that will make that reality rather than just words? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Even a long time ago, the guiding principles for healthcare design published by the Joint Commission, agreed to that some buildings are partially obsolete when they open. Nearly every healthcare structure will be obsolete in some way before it's completed its useful life. So future proofing is an important thing and has been for a long time, acknowledged by several other folks. So the question is, what happens to the pretty hospital the day after open house? And what can we do to manage clinical reality that sets in? So first, I want to step back and remind everybody who we are serving. All right, this is our collective designs. We serve the most challenging environments in healthcare. It can be really any patient care environment, but remember that the stuff that is touching the patient, in this case, the infant, all of that stuff goes somewhere, right? It goes to a device, it goes to something, and those some things often look like this. And this is a high acuity pediatric environment. I took this picture myself several years ago, brand new, it just opened up, but this is a 13, 14-year-old in there. What you can't see is underneath behind those IV poles, there's the foot of the dad sitting on the couch, who's pretty much blocked from view by the stuff that shows up there. And until we get to a Dr. McCoy tricorder, where all this stuff goes away, we are stuck with this as we develop our new environments. And we really need to think on the front end of the design process how best to manage that. Because when you're putting 13 or 14 infusion pumps at a bedside on top of everything else that goes there, it's a challenge. And that's the challenge we want to meet. We look at that from a good news, bad news perspective. So we have good news and bad news in every construction project. The good news is that we've got a renovation project. We're going to put new lights, new wallpaper, new furniture, new carpet. It's all great. Put new glass finishes. This is wonderful. We call this Utopia General Hospital. This is the hospital everybody wants to practice in, and it's the hospital everybody wants to go to when they're sick. And it's the goal of every design professional, and to have that perfect healing environment. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great goal to have. We just have to keep it in perspective. And the perspective comes in the form of the bad news. And that is there a hose, a tube, a cable, or wire that's going to go away just because patients are moving into a new facility? The reality of that, sadly, is no, it is not. A patient room is nothing more than a dysfunctional application of dissimilar technologies. And when you draw it out in line form, you've got the poor patient in the middle, you got all this stuff floating around the patient, and somewhere clinicians are supposed to be mindful of infection control. It's a mess. It's a traditional integration of medical equipment fosters chaos. And when you look at it like this, it's even more discombobulating for the patient because they see all this stuff around them and they don't know what it is, and it's a very intimidating space. So, and even more when Captain Chaos shows up and clinicians have arrived on site. We used to use this in the fire department as the chief has arrived on scene. So I'm borrowing this from the clinical side, but things start looking like this. So no matter what your solid surface finishes are, the floor, the ceiling, you can do all the pretty work in these places, but the day Captain Chaos shows up, it's going to look like this. And we have to plan for that reality post-occupancy, and that's what we're all about. There's a lot of process improvement things out there, Genba and Gemba, Kaizen, and all of this stuff, but really it boils down to, we have patients coming into the hospital with an expectation. We at the hospital in the healthcare environment, need to apply Gemba, rules and process improvement. Gemba is the word where work takes place. It's the Japanese word, and this whole process improvement thing where work takes place, and work takes place in a hospital. And then we have the healthcare provider, and then we have the facility that funnels through, and ultimately patient satisfaction is what we're looking for at the end of that process. So they check in at Gemba, they interact with the staff and with the facility, and out they go with what we expect to be patient satisfaction. So, and that's what we need to be prepared for, that we manage that space from the time they come in to the time they leave. But we need to look at this from a little bit different point of view. We go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And one of the things that COVID showed us at the very, very beginning of all of this is that caregiver safety was compromised from day one. Not enough PPE, not enough place to put patients, patient care was compromised. We really need to go back as to what are the foundational layers of building an appropriate patient care environment. And the most foundational layer of all is caregiver safety, because when you had nurses and firefighters and first responders falling out because they were getting COVID, right, it even made the situation worse because now you had staffing issues, and when staffing issues arise and you have clinical accuracy issues, you have patient safety issues. So we need to start thinking of our designs and our facilities to fundamentally go back that we are a place of health care, and the people delivering health care are the most important cornerstone of that foundation. Visibility, communication, efficiency, privacy, they're all things that need to be part of that solution, but they are certainly not the cornerstones of the foundation. And then the least important and the last things to consider are the ease of use and comfort. Right? Those are unfortunately that which we, I think, for the last 20 years have been using as our primary foundation. And we've been building a lot of hotels that have been mimicking hospitals or trying to play hospital. And I really think we need to get back to looking at this level of the hierarchy of needs rather than that upside down pyramid that we've seen for the last 20 years. So, because this is what happens to a patient care environment or to a healthcare facility when those ideas of patient care aren't thought of on the front end of the design process. You've got computers plugged into normal outlets. You've got soap next to dispensers of gloves that you can't come out. You've got sharps containers on top of gloves dispensers that'll never get filled, and so on and so on and so on. And every hospital, I'm sure, has dozens and dozens of examples that they can look at for this and see that, yeah, we have a problem because we did not plan for this on the front end properly. So let's back up and say there's no perfect or static patient environment. If we can say that on the front end and stop planning for that perfect environment, it does us all a whole lot more. It gives us more flexibility in how we look forward to our solution. So patient treatment requires devices, technology, hoses, tubes, cables, all of which change per patient, and not planning for them does our clients a major disservice. So let's also talk a little bit about value engineering. Value engineering is usually thrown around as a term at the end of the project. We're out of money. Let's VE something out so we can stay in budget and stay under our timeline. It's not what value engineering is. Value engineering is a very well defined concept by the National Institute of Building Sciences. It is neither a design or peer reviewed nor cost cutting exercise. That's what it is not. What it is achieving the essential functions at the lower total cost over the life of the project without compromising the functional and value objectives of the client. Value engineering needs to be done on the front end of a project to bring in the tools which can manage those environments over the life cycle. And think about an equipment management strategy as an insurance policy for the facility, for your designs, for your design intent. We all have insurance. We get house insurance, car insurance, life insurance, right? We all pay money up front for it. We hope we never need it, but when we do, we're glad we have it. And an equipment management strategy is exactly the same thing for every healthcare environment you can envision. Because, and by the way, even the Code of Federal Regulations puts out and says if you're going to use money from the government, you have to design your building to the lowest life cycle cost or most life cycle cost effective means, which means integrating things like an equipment management strategy to reduce the life cycle costs. And again, this is out there in the market. You can read it. Your peers are saying it. This is what's being discussed. So, and let's talk about what the cost relative is in terms of a little upfront cost versus the reality cost of not doing it upfront. So, the people on the institutions inside, are, and this was published a couple of years ago, understand that there is a big cost of operating a building. And if we look at capital costs, where you might include an equipment management strategy, right? Let's say we're going to increase that by 5%. If we call that $1, you've increased it by 5 cents. But let's say we lower your maintenance costs by 5%, right? All of a sudden, you've saved $5. And if we lower your operational cost by 5%, you've saved $20. So who is not willing to spend 5 cents to save $5 or save $20 downstream? It's been documented that those are the relative cost savings. It is worth that extra 5 cents on the front end to any user. This is broken down just by another source, but basically says the same thing, that you look at the relative cost of planning and design and construction versus the activation and operations cost of a healthcare facility. It's peanuts on the front end to implement a tool that will help them long-term future-proof their facility. So an equipment management master planning cycle has an impact on a whole lot of orbits circling around the patient. First technology, family, and clinicians, and then your clinical outcomes, your ergonomic designs, your movement through the hospital, the equipment management, but everything from HCAP scores and life cycle cost reductions and acuity adaptable environments and revenue loss prevention, which is a huge thing. That's all of the solar system, if you will, that an equipment management strategy can have an impact on. Here's just a really good example. It'll guard against the inevitable changes requested by the clinicians when Captain Chaos shows up. This is a pediatric ER down here in Florida. The GCX channel was mounted exactly where the drawings had it. The clinicians came in when they opened it up and said, I want it closer to the center line of the bed because they're pediatric patients. Sometimes they're in small cribs and stuff, don't want to reach that far. And what do? They took the GCX off the Corian and plowed 12 more holes into the Corian after value engineering out a rail system towards the end of the project. So from a value standpoint, this is a very, very bad decision to VE that out and to not put those devices which need clinical interface onto an equipment management tool. So it killed the entire design intent of that facility. These are still designs that we see every day that haven't been thought through, that ultimately will cost an owner a lot of money. This is architectural plans that we received on a project back in August. You have vacuum bottle slides above the vacuum outlets, which you really can't do. Then number one. Number two, if you put them up there, you can't put your regulators in. You have a choice. You can put a canister, you can put a regulator, but you can't put both. And you have oxygen outlets right on top of a suction outlet, which you can, again, it makes the owner choose, do you want oxygen or do you want vacuum, because you can't have both. But these are the designs that we're still seeing out there. And it's shameful that anybody in today's healthcare industry can actually produce something like this and release it to a client for approval. And we really need to start looking at what's going to happen when this unit opens. And those are the things that we need to work on the front end of this process. Because what happens when we don't, we get stuff like this. And that's just another reference, not even gases, but people don't want things here, they move it over there, contracts change, and it all kills the design intent of the facility. Waste from hoarding. If you're not planning equipment properly, you're going to overdo your inventory, and now you're not going to have specific places for stuff to be, and which will require staff to rummage through drawers. And when you're gloved up, you are technically contaminated, and every time you go into a drawer, you technically cross-contaminate stuff. So think about par leveling inventories and the tools which are available to you on the front end of the process to make that par level happen. So when chaos shows up, we can manage it. Organization does drive perception, and perception drives reality. If you walk into a room that looks cluttered and chaotic, no matter how clean the room is, and this has been published, your perception of the care in that space will go down. So from an HCAP perspective, if you don't have a really sharp, clean room, it doesn't matter how clean the room really is. You can have your UV robot. You can have the best care in the world. But if the perception of care is diminished because of clutter in the room, that's a problem for your HCAP scores in your long term. So that's been published. So what we're trying to do by implementing an equipment management strategy is give the user team the tools to manage and organize the space that they are working in. When the patient comes in, they see it structured, they see it neat, they see it organized. And you walk into a room that's like shown here, they feel good about what's going to happen in that room because they have a confidence that these people have got their act together. So that's what we're trying to do, is help improve the HCAP score level through organizational design with things like this. And it's been documented in several places that patients who perceive hospital cleanliness in a negative light often do more than give low scores on HCAP. They actually take their business elsewhere. So that's what we want to try to avoid. Hand washing, obviously a hot topic in this past year. The sign on the right, I've only seen one unit one time at a neonatal unit up in Connecticut actually have that outside their doors. The cell phone is probably the dirtiest thing that's on you right now. And what do you do when you walk in a neonatal unit? You stick it on top of the incubator, or you put it on a shelf somewhere and you just pick up more germs and you transfer that which is on there. So, we need to start looking at really what is a terminal clean going to look like in a post-COVID-19 environment. Nobody can give me that answer because we're still not sure. The one thing I hope COVID has brought to us is that we will increase the track record of hand washing in our facilities. This is an amalgamation of 34 studies done by the University of North Carolina before COVID. The average adherence to hand washing requirements was only 40%. And we wonder why we have a huge spike in hospital-acquired infections. Pre-COVID, we were losing 100,000 people a year from hospital-acquired infections. 1 in 25 patients in the United States got an infection while they were in a hospital. It costs our healthcare business as a whole over $100 billion and adds 19.2 hospital stay days and an average of $43,000 per incident to every hospital, right? So these are not new, or this is not old data. This is new data. This is what is out there. And, we need to do something to help people be more compliant with their hand washing. Sepsis is another thing that's out there. We don't talk about it. COVID has kind of covered up everything in the other disease realm. But pre-COVID, we were losing 590 patients a day in 2018. And in 2019, we lost 270,000 patients a year because of sepsis. And they are finally getting around to putting more money in there. $41 billion each year is on the cost of sepsis. And this is Joint Commission stuff as of September of 2020. So there's a lot of people dying of a lot of different causes other than COVID. And again, all of that is infection control related. So what's it got to do with us? Well, one more point here, by the way. So to tell you about, antibiotic resistant strains of stuff out there. This was at a bus station in South Florida. I took this picture myself. It is not a meme. But when they're putting alerts like this at bus stations, you know that it's a real issue. And this past year, they finally put out some money for some specifically related to antibiotic resistance for the gonorrhea issue. So again, it's a real thing, and more than 35,000 people die every year from drug-resistant infection. So again, this is real. This is the stuff that we deal with every day. And sometimes we contribute from a design perspective and also from a manufacturing perspective to this mess. This head wall is no longer available, to the market, but at the one point, it had these panel doors. People didn't want to see hoses, but if you look at the picture on the bottom, that's what it looked like behind the panel. Out of sight, out of mind is not a solution for creating an effective patient care environment that is optimal for cleaning and disinfecting. So it can be done. This is a picture out of the Middle East. A hospital has put monitoring for their clinical team as to how often they went to a soap and how often they went to a sink. They've improved their compliance over 90%. And in this particular hospital, had the lowest infection incidence in the entire country of Saudi Arabia. It's amazing. But what we also did is consider adopting better signage. Before touching a patient, these are the 5 steps of hand washing and when you use soap and foam. And I've not seen anybody in the United States adopt anything like this at the patient bedside, which is really unfortunate, because over in the Middle East, they've done this. They put directions down there. They've really put it out there in your face as a reminder that, hand washing and hand hygiene are the safest guards against transmitting disease of any kind, whether it's COVID or some other form of sepsis or anything else. We need to get in a way or to figure out a way to do this better, I think, in the US. So a couple of years ago, Harley Ellis Devereaux, on behalf of the Center for Health Design, did publish an evidence-based design goal on the subject of hand washing. And their conclusion was that placing the hand washing accessories on an equipment rail allows adjustment in the system without creating a damage to the wall or a potential home for pathogens. So what this tells us is that the best practice identified by an architect through the Center for Health Design on evidence-based design study says use a rail for your hand washing items at a sink. That's probably the easiest and most simple conclusion. And when you look at the financial responsibilities too that a rail can impact, purchasing is very linear, very structured. Their goal is to save the hospital cost. So when they renegotiate a foam contract and they save the hospital $40,000 a year, somebody in supply chain is really, really, really proud of themselves. But then they give it over to the facilities management and it costs them $90,000 of labor, material, and lost room revenue to change the dispensers. How much have they saved? So it's one of those arguments that we really have to think about how we are building a hospital to limit the real cost of operations and reducing the change requirements, because double-sided sticky tape and drywall have never, nor will they ever be compatible. That's just the way it is. Yet what do we do on every single project? We stick these foams and we soap and we drill holes in the wall for paper towels, and we kill our design intent up front, and we did completely obsolete that hospital the day you move in. So from a cost saving standpoint, yes, rail, like insurance, costs more upfront. However, the first time you need it and the first change you make in a swap of a soap or a foam or a sharps container contract, the first time you do that, you have recouped your upfront cost and more. And every time you make more change, you save even more. And that is what real future proofing is all about. This graph shows you how to future proof your facility. An equipment management strategy can impact infection control by managing any infection control device anywhere, whether it's at the sink, whether it's in an OR, whether it's for signage, it doesn't matter. If you cannot paint behind it, you cannot clean behind it. When we screw things to the wall and then you get a patient that has got a spray of blood or whatever it is that they're spraying out there, you should be able to take that device off the wall, as the picture is on the right, identify that which is dirty, clean it effectively, clean the wall behind it, and then place it back. That's where I hope we are going in a post-COVID-19 world. Then we also talk about optimization of workflow. Here you have a blood draw area. You come into the right, you grab your gloves, you treat your patient, you do your thing, you put your sharps away, grab your wipes, wipe down the chair, grab your foam, and you foam out. All right, that's optimal workflow. If they want to change that room and put the chair on the left, all they do is swap the accessories from left to right, scoot the sharps container down a little bit on that rail, and they've completely reoriented that room in about 90 seconds without any construction, without any work, without any patch or paint, without any clinical compromise. Again, infection control devices can be located anywhere. Scrub sinks, perfect home for a rail system. Because right now they've got stainless steel shelves, they put these cardboard boxes on them, they get wet, they get moldy, they get nasty. It's a very, very, very bacteria-friendly environment in spite of needing to be one of the cleanest environments. So again, think about equipment management strategy for your ORs as you plan those moving forward. Every healthcare environment can use an equipment management system for infection control. If it's on a wall, it should be on a rail, whether it's a lab or phlebotomy or public toilets or restrooms. It's the fastest and easiest way to do that and ensure cost cutting. I mean, in the ORs, the middle picture, all right, that's what pretty much every OR in the United States looks like, because when we plan ORs, we have zero planning for the stuff that comes in post-occupancy. When the anesthesia people move in with their hoses, they have no place to manage their hoses. There should be a mandate or at least a guideline that says you should have a tool in your ORs to manage the stuff that's coming in after you open. Please consider that. So again, an equipment management strategy on the front end allows you to accommodate those things that are coming after the day of open house. And equipment cables off the floor, again, getting them off the floor, giving the things like phones, pillow speakers, infusion pumps off the floor, giving them an opportunity to swing out of the way. You can put a lot of stuff in a condensed space. If you look at the picture on the left, you've got 6 feet of space between curtains. They have their computer, they've got their monitor, they've got their gloves, sharps, diagnostic instruments, everything off the floor, and allows housekeeping to clean that space between patients. It's a very effective use of managing space. And again, what's a terminal clean going to look like in a post-COVID-19 environment? Facilities at some point may need to get ready to be able to strip the room down of everything so they can bring the UV robots in. UV robots will not clean behind an item. It's a linear line of sight light. So if you have a glove box, if you have a monitor, if you have a sharps container, you're never going to clean what's behind it based on that robot in the room. So the ability to dismantle that room quickly and efficiently, clean those individual items, then go in and clean the room effectively and then put everything back in, that may very well be the future of our post-pandemic terminal clean requirements. And then when you talk about life cycle costs that an equipment management strategy brings you, there are very few things you will buy today that will give you a 30-year life cycle. We have that demonstrated in dozens and dozens of healthcare facilities where product that was installed, 20, 30, in some case 40 years ago is still in use, has been recycled, reused in updated areas. And that is what the value of an equipment management strategy brings to you, because you can put that in on the front end of the design process with a life cycle guarantee of 30 years. Not a lot of things will do that to you. Again, we're not talking about bringing new technology into a healthcare facility. Everything we're talking about is going to be there anyway. The sharps, the diagnostics, the paper towels, the glove box, the charting racks, everything goes in anyway. All we're suggesting is you strategize with your users to park them on an equipment management rail, allowing them to move, adapt, and change those things during the life cycle cost of that space. And from a user standpoint, I come from a user background, you have all these Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen, Kanban, everything else out there. From a user, process improvement means give me what I need, when I need, and where I need it. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Put that which I need in a place where I can get it when I need it. That's simple. An equipment management tool allows them to do that. This is a before picture of an environment that we came in to work with. You see the covered wire carts off in the corner. You have no idea what's in there. You have to touch those things to open it up. So if you get a patient, you're gloved up. You've by definition cross-contaminated. There's very limited floor space because of all the stuff on the wall. So the ability to take that and turn it into this, drop their inventory in that room, the par level inventory, by 60%, and 25 square feet of floor space was recaptured by moving most of the stuff in those carts onto an equipment management tool. Right? The rail pays for itself in that case, and again, this case in a retrofit space, but it is something that we want to consider for new construction, so we don't have to compromise in the first place when we move in. Again, before and after pictures of an emergency department. This one happens to be also in the Middle East. You see on the left, upper left, you see all the diagnostic instruments as far away from the patient as you can probably get them in that room. And you see the sharps container on the opposite side of the patient to where the clinicians are. So very poor layout, very poor design. Simply by use of an equipment management rail, we were able to bring the diagnostic instruments to the point of care and bring all of the other stuff that they needed over to the sink. And then the night we left that afternoon, it's an installation I was personally involved with. And the next day we came in the next morning and the clinicians had rearranged everything again. And they moved stuff around, and just because they could. And now they took control of that environment and optimized it for what they wanted and where they wanted it. And this is future proofing. This is what we need to do in our future facilities to give those clinicians the control of that space and able to manage those environments. And also for work surfaces. I mean, everyone wants a work surface, but when you clutter a work surface up with stuff, it by definition becomes a shelf. It's not a work surface anymore because you can't work on it. So we want to try to prevent the work surfaces that you spend a lot of time integrating into a design from becoming shelves. And again, if we give homes to everything that's ancillary in that environment, a place off the work surface, then you have room to work again. And this goes for any kind of space you're talking about. The good before and after here, that work surface became nothing but a shelf, couldn't do much of anything on it. By transferring all of that stuff onto the wall via an equipment management tool, it gave the users their work surface back. And that's the whole point of this, is giving the users identifying control. Technology changes. While Challen is changing diagnostic instruments constantly. I'm gonna see if I can get this to play, and if you can hear it on your speakers. This is a leaky gas out.
The gas that they're using are not truly compatible with what we do.
That's the gas outlet that is leaking.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna push them out in the wall.
No more leak.
All right, no more leak. Outlets in a hospital, wall station outlets, were never nor ever designed to be load bearing. Yet what do we do when we surge or when we overflow or we run out because code and reality are as far away from one another as east is from west? We put splitter blocks on and we destroy the integrity of that outlet in the wall. And that costs the hospital, again, life cycle cost big time. If you can take and absorb the weight of the additional gases on a rail system, and this is a true before and after right there, what you're looking at, you can absolutely duplicate everything that was on that splitter on top of splitter thing on the left and turn it into a single accessory mounted on the right. That is the ideal solution for managing gas expansion non-invasively without cutting into the walls or anything else. Again, this can be done in any area, whether it's phased construction. You got to dump out of an ICU and do a med-surg wing temporarily while you renovate the ICU. You can actually ramp up your ICU into, or a med-surg area into an ICU very quickly without going into a wall or without doing any work. So we draw and specify into all construction documents. If it's on a wall, it's on a rail. It's easy. Division 11, Section 11. We have, it's an easy place to put an equipment management tool while you're doing your planning. We do a lot of post-occupancy work as well. We try to look at what worked on the drawing. An Army sergeant told me it always works on paper, right? So, well, it does. It always works on paper. It doesn't always work when you move in. So we want to just be aware of that. There is a lead credit that is for design for flexibility, that if you're going for lead credit, the integration of an equipment management tool will help you with that, because the language in there says flexibility and ease of future adaptation. Something that can be easily done. Again, incorporating the equipment management strategy will help you with your lead credits. You can integrate an equipment management strategy into a third-party product. Whether it's a wall system. Again, the purpose of that is to give the user long-term flexibility of their wall panel systems. The last thing you want to do is make Swiss cheese out of those panels. So integrating an equipment management tool into any of those systems helps a great deal in preserving the investment that the hospital made on that product. Whether it's solid surface, again, Corian tile, what is the true cost of maintaining a high quality finish? It costs a lot. We need to factor that in on the front end. This is a true before and after. It's a VA, a large CBOC facility out in the West Coast. The picture on the left was the true picture that nobody bothered ever patching holes. When we talk about sound transmission and the STC rating on a wall like that, it's crazy. So at the end, they moved to the new facility. They've got 5 wall penetrations and they got everything accomplished and don't have to worry about that. So if acoustics with all of the new telemedicine is important, and you have people, sharing rooms, or you've got telemedicine rooms on the other side of patient rooms, you really want to consider how many wall penetrations you're making. And again, the equipment management strategy on the front end will help you manage those spaces better. So, well, again, what insurance is available? It's really easy. No more Swiss cheese in the walls, no more maintenance people having to come in and patch and paste. The equipment rail will help you define those parameters and make life a lot easier for the owner to move in and manage that space. We know the only constant in healthcare is change. And again, we talk about equipment management strategy and life cycle costs and value engineering. Here's a good example of value engineering employed what we would consider the best practice. The bigger picture is the installation when it first moved in. You can see the computer on the left side with the gloves on the left. At some point, the nurses said, well, I have to turn my back more to the patient. Sometimes when I'm there, I'd rather have the computer at the head of the bed. So they moved the gloves, they scooted everything around. They moved that folding tray off to the side, which you can't see, but everything else is pretty much the same as when they moved in. But they were able to meet the demand of the clinicians without having to shut the room down, without losing room revenue, and just by readapting those things that are on the rail to a different location. That is value engineering at its highest level. And you can do that at any level of acuity. You can do that in patient rooms, you can do that in ICUs, you can do that in this case, a high acuity university level post anesthesia care unit. There's nothing on the floor. You'll note that there's nothing on the floor. They have their linens, they have all of their stuff off the floor, managed on the rail system. The computers, the monitors, everything is managed. The users defined these spaces by themselves. It was not hard and fast on an architectural drawing. They control that environment, and housekeeping, environmental services can come in and adequately clean the space between patients, which is ultimately what we want to do. So incorporate tools to manage evolving technology and user demand. We want to preserve your design intent against the inevitable ruin of change. I mean, it's going to happen. You're going to replace things. You're going to change contracts. It's something that we know is given. You can do like the picture on the upper left, where the architect actually incorporated the rail into the mural, and whoever the muralist is parked that little chipmunk on the rail, and had all of that stuff been screwed into that wall and double pasted on a wall, it would kill the design intent of that mural in there. So that's the value of something as simple as an equipment management strategy. Apply tools to manage supplies and inventory, whether it's a storage room, whether it's a supply room. There's a lot of different ways to manage inventory, not just at the bedside, but also in your central storage and supply. Again, diagnostic instruments change on a constant level. They are always moving, and then you've got left-handed people and right-handed people, and they always want them in different locations. So we want to try to accommodate that as best as we can. Infection control solutions, even in the lower acuity environments, physicians' offices, clinics. Again, these are all devices that at will point change and be changed out of anybody's control. Retrofitting existing space, backfill areas. So we have, stand by. My apologies. We have an office dog and somebody at the door. So equipment management, again, retrofit existing space. It's basically taking the space, giving a new facelift, adding the rails, and then very easily accommodating everything that they need to in the new area. Management for use in the OR, same thing, whether it's lead apron holders or whether it's, all sorts of other things, in that case, can be equally managed in the OR space. Simulation centers, it's a big upcoming thing. Many universities are adding that as part of their upgrades. The beauty of having an equipment management strategy in a simulation center is that you can easily adapt those spaces to whatever you're teaching at the time. You want to turn it into a trauma center, it's great. You want to turn it into an OB area, an ultrasound area, or a general med surg patient room. You take the accessories out, you have rail and a clean supply room, and you adapt that space to whatever learning is going on at the time. That's the beauty of it. And again, retrofit space is just another example. So let's talk just a brief amount on disaster and surge and how an equipment management strategy will help manage and support your response to a mass casualty incident. MCI is defined as any situation where the number of injured needing care exceeds the resources available to perform care. And God, we've had enough of that this year in COVID. In Florida, we have that all the time with our hurricanes. But Benjamin Franklin got it right. If you're failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And this is something, again, master planning for mass casualty exercises and mass casualty is something not a lot of people talk about, but again, it goes back to the basics of what's the caregiver going to do during a mass casualty event, regardless of what causing the event. We do a risk assessment, hazard vulnerability assessment. It's outlined in the NFPA standards. It's going to have a heavy play in the new FGI guidelines of identifying what the HVA is. And there's going to be a really high focus on the post-COVID-19 world. And the goal is always to proactively manage the compromise rather than reactively deal with it. And life safety should always be given the highest priority. Again, form over function, practical over pretty is critical in a mass casualty environment. So we've learned in many cases that throughput is better than parking. We've learned that from the Pulse nightclub shooting. We learned that through COVID-19, is that the last thing you want to do is park patients in an ER during a mass casualty event. There's got to be throughput. Therefore, alternate care locations must be identified. And this is going to be a whole separate section in the new FGI guidelines on mass casualty. There's going to be a required need for hospitals to identify alternate care sites within the hospital that they can surge up to and be prepared for. So picture on the left, when you can bring all the technology to a remote offsite location or alternate location, is far better than parking patients in the ER. In the ERs right now, Everyday America, the picture on the right was taken in a university ER, 32 hallway beds as a standard, again, long before pandemic time. This is what their everyday looked like and looks like again today. Nowhere near those patients are gloves, foam, soap, sharps, supplies, anything that is good for the caregiver. Everything there in the hallway is compromised. The ability to bring carts or the essential services to a remote location, whether it's a tent or an ER hallway, is vital in maintaining continuity of care, caregiver safety, and clinical accuracy. That's what we need to start looking at. I show this picture because it's been around forever. These head walls have been used in labor and delivery for 20 some odd years. What if gas outlets were pre-positioned behind artwork in a lobby? Why can't we do this as a course of our design to prepare our clinicians to give service in non-traditional spaces? Our regulatory agencies at some point have to become aware of this need, and we have to lobby them to allow these things to happen in areas that are not just labor and delivery and stuff. But this is a perfect example of what we could do in cafeterias even, just to designate internal off-site spaces. So we encourage you to ask the what if scenario. We could never have what if 9/11, we could have never what if COVID, but we can think about what if the hurricane strikes, what if the flood comes, what if the snowstorm hits in Texas. And that's another one we're going to read about for a while. So, but as you go through your designs with your clients, ask those what if scenarios. And in the process, empower the users to improve the patient-centered care, improve HCAP scores, lean and minimize your inventory and your loss of expired inventory. In a drawer, it's the first in, last out inventory system. Whatever's behind the drawer was the first thing to go in the drawer. And it usually comes out during the preparation for a Joint Commission inspection when they realize it's been expired and they got to throw it out. Terminal clean, it reduces hospital-acquired infections and improve overall hygiene. Make financially responsible choices, but do that on the front end of the process. Look at this as an insurance policy that you may need to pay a little more for, but it will pay back. And we have all, years of evidence-based information on that it will save costs in the long run. Create flexible, adaptable, expandable environments, truly that are demonstrable, right? Not just talking in words, but you can actually do these things. And prepare for surge population management, which will become an FGI guideline in 2022, and employ true value engineering, which is ultimately what it boils down to. So with this, we suggest that you protect your patients and your users. We ensure that your investment in a new facility or renovation is used wisely. And we reduce your overall cost of doing business as a firm, as an equipment planning firm as well. Because how many revisions can you save just by putting rail up on the wall and say, hey, when you guys move in, you can put it anywhere you want because we don't care. I mean, there's a lot to be said for being able to just give the users that flexibility post-occupancy because you can, and not have to worry about on an architectural drawing, well, where's my soap, where's my foam, or where's all this going? At some point, it doesn't matter anymore. So with this, that concludes our CEU presentation. We appreciate the partnership with ACE and our ability to present this to you today. Our contact information is here. I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A. I'll let the moderators determine that, but we've got a little bit over 10 minutes to do that. But again, my name's Gary Schindel. Thank you for your time and consideration, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Again, we'll leave the screen up here. I'll let you write that down, and I look forward to hearing back from you. Thank you very much.